Tss, donk. The Majestic came gliding into New York Harbor on an April morning. She sniffed at the tugboats and turtle-gated ferries, winked at a gaudy young yacht, and ordered a cattle boat out of her way with a snarling whistle of steam. Then she parked at her private dock with all the fuss of a stout lady sitting down, and announced complacently that she had just come from Cherbourg and Southampton with a cargo of the very best people in the world. The very best people in the world stood on the deck and waved idiotically to their poor relations, who were waiting on the dock for gloves from Paris. Before long, a great toboggan had connected the Majestic with the North American continent, and the ship began to disgorge these very best people in the world, who turned out to be Gloria Swanson, 2 buyers from Lord and Taylor, the financial minister from Graustark with a proposal for funding the debt, and an African king who had been trying to land somewhere all winter and was feeling violently seasick. The photographers worked passionately as the stream of passengers flowed onto the dock. There was a burst of cheering at the appearance of a pair of stretchers laden with 2 Middle Westerners who had drunk themselves delirious on the last night out. The deck gradually emptied, but when the last bottle of Benedictine had reached the shore, the photographers still remained at their posts, and the officer in charge of debarkation still stood at the foot of the gangway, glancing first at his watch and then at the deck as if some important part of the cargo was still on board. At last, from the watchers on the pier, there arose a long-drawn "Ah!" as a final entourage began to stream down from Deck B. First came 2 French maids carrying small, purple dogs, and followed by a squad of porters, blind and invisible under innumerable bunches and bouquets of fresh flowers. Another maid followed, leading a sad-eyed orphan child of a French flavor, and close upon its heels walked the second officer, pulling along 3 neurasthenic wolfhounds, much to their reluctance and his own. A pause, then the captain, Sir Howard George Witchcraft, appeared at the rail, with something that might have been a pile of gorgeous silver fox fur standing by his side. Rags Martin Jones, after 5 years in the capitals of Europe, was returning to her native land. Rags Martin Jones was not a dog. She was half a girl and half a flower. And as she shook hands with Captain Sir Howard George Witchcraft, she smiled as if someone had told her the newest, freshest joke in the world. All the people who had not already left the pier felt that smile trembling on the April air and turned around to see. She came slowly down the gangway. Her hat, an expensive, inscrutable experiment, was crushed under her arm, so that her scant boy's hair, convict's hair, tried unsuccessfully to toss and flop a little in the harbor wind. Her face was like 7 o'clock on a wedding morning, save where she had slipped a preposterous monocle into an eye of clear, childish blue. At every few steps, her long lashes would tilt out the monocle, and she would laugh, a bored, happy laugh, and replace the supercilious spectacle in the other eye. Tap! Her 105 pounds reached the pier, and it seemed to sway and bend from the shock of her beauty. A few porters fainted. A large, sentimental shark which had followed the ship across made a despairing leap to see her once more, and then dove, broken-hearted, back into the deep sea. Rags Martin Jones had come home. There was no member of her family there to meet her, for the simple reason that she was the only member of her family left alive. In 1913, her parents had gone down on the Titanic together, rather than be separated in this world, and so the Martin Jones fortune of 75 millions had been inherited by a very little girl on her 10th birthday. It was what the consumer always referred to as a quote-unquote shame. Rags Martin Jones, everybody had forgotten her real name long ago, was now photographed from all sides. The monocle persistently fell out, and she kept laughing and yawning and replacing it so no very clear picture of her was taken, except by the motion picture camera. All the photographs, however, included a flustered, handsome young man, with an almost ferocious love light burning in his eyes, who had met her on the dock. His name was John M. Chestnut. He had already written the story of his success for the American magazine, and he had been hopelessly in love with Rags ever since the time when she, like the tides, had come under the influence of the summer moon. When Rags became really aware of his presence, they were walking down the pier, and she looked at him blankly, as though she had never seen him before in this world. "Rags," he began. "Rags." "John M. Chestnut?" she inquired, inspecting him with great interest. "Of course," he exclaimed angrily. "Are you trying to pretend you don't know me? That you didn't write me to meet you here?" She laughed. A chauffeur appeared at her elbow, and she twisted out of her coat, revealing a dress made in great splashy checks of sea blue and gray. She shook herself like a wet bird. "I've got a lot of junk to declare," she remarked absently. "So have I," said Chestnut anxiously. "And the first thing I want to declare is that I've loved you, Rags, every minute since you've been away." She stopped him with a groan. "Please, there were some young Americans on the boat. The subject has become a bore." "My God," cried Chestnut. "Do you mean to say that you class my love with what was said to you on a boat?" His voice had risen, and several people in the vicinity turned to hear. "Shh," she warned him. "I'm not giving a circus. If you want me to even see you while I'm here, you'll have to be less violent." But John M. Chestnut seemed unable to control his voice. "Do you mean to say," it trembled to a carrying pitch, "that you've forgotten what you said on this very pier 5 years ago last Thursday?" Half the passengers from the ship were now watching the scene on the dock, and another little eddy drifted out of the customs house to sea. "John!" Her displeasure was increasing. "If you raise your voice again, I'll arrange it so that you'll have plenty of chance to cool off. I'm going to the Ritz. Come and see me there this afternoon." "But Rags," he protested hoarsely, "listen to me. 5 years ago." Then the watchers on the dock were treated to a curious sight. A beautiful lady in a checkered dress of sea blue and gray took a brisk step forward so that her hands came into contact with an excited young man by her side. The young man, retreating instinctively, reached back with his foot, but finding nothing, relapsed gently off the 30-foot dock and plopped, after a not ungraceful revolution, into the Hudson River. "Ah!" A shout of alarm went up, and there was a rush to the edge just as his head appeared above water. He was swimming easily, and perceiving this, the young lady who had apparently been the cause of the accident leaned over the pier and made a megaphone of her hands. "I'll be in at 4:30, she cried. And with a cheerful wave of her hand, which the engulfed gentleman was unable to return, she adjusted her monocle, threw one haughty glance at the gathered crowd, and walked leisurely from the scene.